This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. All right, so week one's over. That game happened. We looked at the film. We talked about who was to blame. We went through it. We talked about every angle of it. It's done with. I've watched it a bunch of times. I've watched all 22 a bunch of times. I've rewatched the game. Week one is done. It's time to turn the page and talk about what this team needs to do and improve and show in week two versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, again, I don't want to put this picture out there or paint a picture that the Jacksonville Jaguars are a slouch of a team. The Jaguars are a team that, for the most part, was the first place team in the AFC South. They have a quarterback who, if you catch him on a good day, he can hurt you in Trevor Lawrence. They have a good defense. They're a good football team. They're no slouch, right? The Browns shouldn't be expected to walk into Jacksonville and beat them. But what I do expect unconditionally from this Cleveland Browns football team in this week's game is a significantly better outing. Offensively, defensively, whatever you want to say, they need to have a significantly better outing in this game. They need to look like a significantly improved team in this game. I'm going to give you some specifics on what I mean by that, but that's the number one overall thing. Whether that result be a win or a loss, and you would definitely prefer it to be a win, especially because you don't want to start the season 0-2, especially a season where you had so many high expectations as the Cleveland Browns did. But nonetheless, you want to see a significant improvement in a lot of different areas. We'll start defensively. One area where you do want to see significant improvement in is the interior defensive line play. Dalvin Tomlinson should play more, so that should shore up some of the defensive interior play issues that they had at times with the Cowboys offense. I don't think the Browns defense really exhibited that problems. I know there's some people who feel like the Browns defense really struggled in that game versus Dallas. Ultimately, the Cowboys had 14 drives in that game, 7 of them before halftime, and a couple of drives when the game became within 2 or 3 or 2.5 scores. So I think the defense showed up when they needed to. I think they had a couple of drives where they got scored on, but I think it's important to remember that the defense isn't going to be pitching shutouts against Dak Prescott and the CeeDee Lamb and the Dallas Cowboys the whole time. Really, I only saw one drive that really concerned me. The one drive they scored in that Dallas game wasn't really based on them being able to replicate something against this defense. It was just CeeDee Lamb made an incredible catch and throw on good coverage. And then Juwan Thornhill made a mistake that he probably makes hopefully one time this season, being flat-footed, not really paying attention to what's going on down there. Other than that one drive where they were able to get some movement left to right on some screens and on some motion. A little bit concerning there, but ultimately, I trust that this defense is going to be able to adjust and figure out whatever is ailing them on a week-to-week basis. Interior defensive line play, want to see that get better. I want to see more of Jordan Hicks defensively. I think that'd be important. But I think really the heart of this game is going to be about the improvement on offense for this football team. Now, obviously, we want the offense to be better than they were against the Dallas Cowboys. The Browns were likely one of the worst, if not the worst offense. Maybe you can argue that the Carolina Panthers were worse than the Browns were in that game. But, the Browns were one of the worst offenses in football last week. And obviously, you have to improve from that. But you have to improve from that a significant margin. Now, I'm not saying they got to go from looking like one of the most destitute offenses in football to one of the best and most promising offenses in football in 1 week, but you do got to jump from one of the worst in football to mid-tier at least, right? Like, you got to look at least like an average NFL offense. And that was my issue with the Browns in that game versus Dallas. They didn't look like an average NFL offense. Now, how do you get there? From a quarterback perspective, Deshaun's got to stay in that pocket. If you watch my film breakdown, you'll notice when Deshaun did the rare good things in that game, he was in the pocket. He's got to stay in that pocket. He's got to be more committed to making plays out of there. He's got to be more committed to the structure of the play, because moving around, improvising like that, scrambling left and right, breaking left, breaking right whenever he wants, it's not working. It's not creating the open space that he wants it to. Maybe back in 2018, 2019, and 2020, that was something that could happen. But with how the NFL plays defenses now, it's just not going to happen. The NFL has adjusted. You got to play in structure. You got to be comfortable. I mean, look at the number of passers that were under 200 yards this week in the NFL. The league's changed. You're not going to be able to just throw around, toss it around, and move it around like you did a couple of years ago. It's a much different league out there. So from Deshaun Watson, I need him to stay in that pocket. I need him to trust the structure of these plays, and I need him to make the plays within structure. I think he can do it, or at least he showed signs that he could do it. He needs to do it consistently in this game. Offensive line obviously needs to give him time to do that. I think there were times where the offensive line held up pretty well, given what you would consider the stress that they were up against with that Dallas front. And there were times where this offensive line really struggled. I think they need to do a better job of holding up consistently. Really, Wyatt Teller needs to do a better job of holding up in pass pro. There's too many times where Wyatt Teller gets beat. And when you are starting a James Hudson or a Jack Conklin at left tackle for the first time in 10 years, or Jed Wills, you really need your interior to hold up and be solid there, because if Deshaun does get pressure from the edges, right, from one of the tackle positions, you need him to be able to step up in the inside and trust that in order to keep the structure of the play alive. Right now, he's rolling right, kind of in part because the interior pressure is forcing him to not be able to step up. So that's feeding into a bad habit to your quarterback, and it's making a bad habit for your quarterback even worse when you do that, and it's making the offense even worse. So offensive line, interior especially, they need to hold up significantly better than they did in this game. So that's kind of my note there with the offensive line. Wide receivers got to make plays. This wide receiver core sometimes feels like they're just waiting for somebody else to make a play for them. Like they should just be able to stand there and have the ball float to their hands majestically, and that shouldn't be the case. I mean, they traded for Elijah Moore to be a playmaker. They drafted Cedric Tillman to be a playmaker. They traded for Jerry Jeudy and signed him to an extension so he can be a playmaker. They gave Amari Cooper, or continued Amari Cooper's contract so he can become a playmaker. They got to make some plays, and we know Amari Cooper is capable of making plays. We hope that Jerry Jeudy is capable of doing it, and the same is true with Elijah Moore and everybody else in this rotation at wide receiver. But what we saw in week one was a wide receiving core that was waiting for plays to be made for them and not trying to make plays. There are times where Watson didn't get them the ball perfectly in week one, and honestly, Watson should have been able to get them the ball perfect a lot better in some of these situations in week one. So it's not like it's pulling off blame off of Watson here, but you still need to go out and make some plays, damn it. Like, if the throw's not always going to be perfect, you got to make some plays. I've seen them make plays with PJ Walker in there. I've seen them make plays with DTR and Joe Flacco in there. And even when Deshaun Watson was in there last year, I've seen them make plays. You got to make plays at the wide receiver position, regardless of who's at quarterback. And wide receiver wise, we just didn't see any of that. They got to step up. They got to make plays on the ball. They got to look like they want to make a play, because it just looks too passive out there for the wide receiver core. It's way too passive for me. I don't love it. I need to see them be a little bit more aggressive as wide receivers. I need to see them want the ball. I need to see them want to make a play on the ball instead of being like super passive about it. Another one would come, right? Like, that's kind of how it felt at wide receiver across the board. Even the guys who didn't play that poorly, like Jerry Jeudy, it didn't feel like there was a desire to make a play on the ball outside of the one one touchdown Jerry Jeudy did where he did make a play on the ball. So need there to be more of a desire for there to be plays to be made for these wide receivers. From a coaching staff standpoint, Kevin Stefanski and Ken Dorsey, both of these guys who are in charge of the offense, I need to see them commit to running the ball. I get last year why you just abandoned the run game because the run game was abandonable. But what we saw in this week's game was not super abandonable for this run game. I thought that there was stuff there that felt like you could go back to. I think there's some stuff there that they're doing in a run game that's a little bit promising, and they're doing things to fit the personnel a little bit better in the run game. I'm intrigued to see what Jerome Ford does if you give him a little bit more carries. He seems to have improved over the offseason and gotten better at making sure he keeps his head down and gets positive yards at the very least. And I think he did a really good job of that, especially from about the 2-minute warning to the end of the game last week. And I want to see if there's something to that. And look at what the NFL's look like the first week of the season. It's been a lot of running the ball. It's been a lot less passing production. There's been teams that have had more running production than they had passing production. You look at how the San Francisco 49ers played last night on Monday Night Football, and they just ran the ball. I need to see the Browns be able to establish the run. I think a lot of the reason why the deception that Kevin Stefanski tries to have in his playbook when it comes to play action, when it comes to run action, when it comes to RPOs doesn't work is because when Nick Chubb's not in there, there's no reason for the defense to assume there's a threat of run because you've done nothing to establish that Jerome Ford is a threat to run the football. You got to establish him as a threat to run the football in order to run other stuff off of that threat to run the football. So that's really where I want them to make an adjustment. We know this for a fact. Kevin Stefanski's offense rarely looks good when the quarterback has to throw the ball over 35 times. You can name a quarterback. Once you get over that 35 marker, it starts looking a little bit different. This offense is built to thrive while running the football, and you need to have a credible threat running the football. And if it's not Jerome Ford, it has to be Deontay Foreman. You got to find somebody who could be a credible threat there running the football to get you some average production, to get you some yards on first down. And then the last thing I have here, across the board offensively, no more damn penalties. Get rid of whatever it was that was causing all those illegal procedures. And I'll be a little bit lenient on the illegal procedures because I realized that was something that was happening league-wide, all the illegal procedures. So fair enough, right? It wasn't just the Browns having illegal procedures, but the false starts, the holding, the ineligible man downfield penalties, got to cut them down. You had 7 drives get put behind the sticks. Of 14, 7 of them got put behind the sticks by penalties. Pre-snap penalties, most of them. I think there was 1 holding in that. Can't happen. Got to reduce that number significantly. I mean, at least 50%. Can't really be over 3. It would piss me off if you were at 3, but I'll be fine with it. But can't be over 3. Can't be over 3. Honestly, you should be at 1 or 0. With that kind of number. Can't keep putting yourself behind the sticks and expect yourself to play successful football. And you weren't going to beat anybody putting yourself behind the sticks 50% of the time you were out there via penalty. So that has to be done in order to win a football game. Got to get rid of those penalties, fix those things that I mentioned. And if you make some ground on that stuff, I think you have a really good chance to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think you have a chance to start to cut away at some of these issues the offense is having and maybe get out of this first 5 weeks with an offense that you feel a lot better about versus how you felt about them week 1, right? Week 1 is the first impression. It was a bad first impression, but first impressions aren't forever. So the Browns have a chance over time to adjust what that first impression was for this team, and that's what they have to do. So want to see an improvement next week from this team and want to see an improvement in a significant way offensively. So that's my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.